As we mentioned earlier, the Democratic National Convention kicks off in Milwaukee tomorrow. And joining us now is the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes. Mr. Barnes, thanks so much for joining us. I want to jump right to it here because the convention was supposed to put the spotlight on Wisconsin for Democrats. Now it's going virtual. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris aren't even going to be there, but President Trump will for an event tomorrow. How much do you worry this will hurt the Democrats' message and dampen enthusiasm?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned that this will hurt our message or dampen our enthusiasm. It just shows how irresponsible Donald Trump has been. And it shows how Democrats have been using science and letting the medical advice lead the way all throughout this entire pandemic. So like I said, for Donald Trump to show up in person for another campaign event shows just how little he cares about actually finding a solution to the economic woes and the health care concerns that people have in America.
But Donald Trump won Wisconsin in 2016. That was the first time a Republican presidential candidate won that state since 1984. There was low voter turnout. Hillary Clinton was criticized for not paying enough attention to the state. Does Biden still, though, need to find a way to get to Wisconsin to connect and engage with the voters there in person?
Well, let's also remember that Donald Trump got 6,000 fewer votes than Mitt Romney did in 2012. And for Joe Biden to show up to Wisconsin, of course, you want people to show up. But as you can see throughout this entire campaign cycle, those in-person visits are going to be limited just simply because we are not in a place where it's safe for people to gather. So what type of event are we looking at? We're not going to have a large-scale rally here in Wisconsin, at least for the foreseeable future. There aren't going to be big events that are attended by, more than a dozen or so people. So a visit to Wisconsin in person, we know that at this point we're not ready yet. And Donald Trump is a person who has disregarded the science. He's disregarded the medical advice. He's repeatedly attacked doctors, Dr. Fauci, and so many others who have a broader sense about what's actually going on than he does.
Well, I do want to shift gears and talk about the big news from this week. How important was the selection of Kamala Harris as running mate, not only when it comes to motivating black and minority voters, but do you think that she could also help win over some young progressives who've been reluctant to get behind Biden?
Well, I think that it was a shot in the arm. You see the fundraising numbers that came overnight after the VP selection was announced. And for young people, young progressives, I consider myself to be a young progressive voter. And for many of them, Joe Biden was not their first choice. And, honestly, Joe Biden wasn't my first choice. But we know what's at hand right now. And Donald Trump presidency has ill-served everyone in America, whether it's our seniors, whether it's our young people who are uncertain about college, uncertain about their future because we have a climate denier in the White House. We have, with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, two candidates, two people who are ready to take over right away and lead this country in a more positive direction when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to our environment, when it comes to education. The list goes on and on and on. So I do think that people will be excited. I think that, the enthusiasm gap that existed in 2016 is gone now. It's because these two candidates are leading with a vision. They went through a rigorous primary cycle, which changes things, which changes the dynamic. And it also, it brings out the best in them. And it shows how it has created a sort of evolution with both of them as well, from where they were when they first entered the race to where they are now as the nominee for president and vice president.
We do know Wisconsin is also important to Trump as he is engaging in his counter-programming throughout the week as well, again, with that event there in Wisconsin tomorrow. Lieutenant Governor Barnes, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. And, of course, ABC News will provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Democratic National Convention Monday through Thursday. That's beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Live, and then at 10 p.m. Eastern right here on ABC. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Let's bring in the man who will be leading our convention coverage, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos, who's going to be hosting this week later this morning. George, good morning to you. How much of a bounce do you think the Democrats can get out of a convention that's scaled back in this way?
Boy, it's just so hard to know because it's going to be so unlike anything we've ever seen before. You've seen conventions gravitating towards being television productions for the last 20 years or so. Now it's purely a television production. Everybody is going to be virtual. You're not going to see any crowds. So I think it could have some dampening impact on the bounce a little bit, but I would counter that with the idea that you might not have gotten much of a bounce anyway. This is such a polarized nation right now that it's hard to see any big swings in the vote. President Trump's approval rating has been pretty steady at around 40 to 42 for his entire presidency. Joe Biden's lead over Donald Trump has been in the 7 to 9 point range ever since the pandemic started. It's hard to see much changing those numbers in a big way.
It will still, though, be a fascinating week, and you'll be leading our coverage all the way. Let me talk, though, about this mail-in voting scandal. With these changes that are being made to the post office right now, do they represent a real threat to the health of this election?
It could. I mean, there's a good chance you're going to have huge backlogs of mail across the country as you see these cutbacks in overtime and other changes the Postal Service is making. Now, the Postal Service is equipped to get out billions of pieces of mail. They do it every Christmas. The question is how these cutbacks are going to affect that, combined with moves to limit at what point mail has to be postmarked in order to be counted. I think one thing that is very likely is if we have a close election, even if large numbers of voters are not disenfranchised, it's going to take an awful long time to count those votes, and that could lead to questions about the legitimacy of the election.
Right. At the very least, it could go from election night to election week, maybe even longer. George, thank you very much. I want to remind everybody, George has, as always, a big show this morning. Tune in to This Week later this morning when George goes one-on-one with Senator Bernie Sanders about the upcoming Democratic convention. Plus, Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller will be here to discuss the president's re-election effort. George, thank you very much.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.